this month? Okay, this month we are talking about vitamin K, and let me get this back up on the full screen. Okay, and the reason I got started on vitamin K this month was a friend of mine who's a retired medical doctor and neurologist was asking me if he should be taking vitamin K to prevent cardiovascular disease. And I wasn't quite sure how how great the research was. And it turns out there's been quite a lot done in recent years. So I thought that was worth looking at just for his sake and for mine and for all of us. So we're going to be looking at vitamin K today. What are the benefits? How good is the research? And which kind do we need? Talk a little bit about how much we might need. So it's almost unheard of to have vitamin K deficiency in the U.S. From a strict point of view. Now there's some caveats to that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But vitamin K is present in the body in two major forms. It's vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. Vitamin K1 is primarily used for blood clotting, and it's the one that most of us usually think about when we talk about vitamin K. But vitamin K2 also has a lot of functions, but they're not as well characterized as the clotting factor. The vitamin K1 is mostly stored in the liver, whereas vitamin K2 is widely distributed. You can absorb vitamin K1 pretty well, but it's almost all taken up by the liver rather quickly. So you never have much in circulation. That makes it a little bit difficult in its case to know the status of it, because measuring blood levels are not too easily, or not too worthwhile in a lot of ways. Vitamin K2 is involved in removing calcium deposits, among other things. And a lot of these tissues are very much involved in calcium flux, in and out. Some things will bring it in, some things will bring it out, and it's constantly changing. And that gets a little bit out of whack, then you can have a system where you have calcium accumulating in these tissues and having calcification of tissues where you don't want it. And so vitamin K2 really helps prevent that. And suboptimal K2 levels, at least by some accounts, is very common. And that's really hard to say definitively because there's no RDI for vitamin K2. There's no safe upper level. It's never been shown to be toxic, particularly. So it's there's not as much known officially about the requirements, although they are studied quite a bit for K2. Now, vitamin K was first identified as a coagulation factor. The letter K was the first in the alphabet that was available to assign it to a vitamin. So they called it vitamin K, and coincidentally, that corresponded with the letter of the German word coagulation, because it is a coagulation feature. So that was kind of fortuitous, and it was discovered by Germans. Vitamin K is now known to be more than one substance, not just vitamin K1. Now, vitamin K1 is mostly obtained from vegetables, green leafy vegetables in particular. Your collards and kale and things like that are great sources of vitamin K1. Vitamin K2 is from mostly fermented foods and animal products. So you can get some forms of K2 from eating. The MK7 form mostly comes from the soybeans, fermented soybeans and things like that, similar foods. Some of the other, like MK4, 8, and 9, are more from cheeses and meats, are your better sources of that K2. Now, we'll look just briefly at the vitamin K structures. Vitamin K can be, like I said, one of actually three subtypes, 1, 2, or 3. But K3 is only a synthetic one, and it's somewhat toxic, so we don't really consider it nutritionally. Vitamin K2 exists in several different forms, and the most common being MK4, and that goes by the how long this side chain is. MK7 is a little bit longer, 8, 9 still longer. But the main difference you see in vitamin K1 and 2 are the what you call double bonds. You see this little line here and here and here. That indicates what they call a double bond on that chain. And when you have a double bond like that, it affects how the molecule itself bends and all of that. So that makes it a little bit different shape, and that affects how it works. Now, a lot of things, vitamin K1 and K2 can both do the same. They're not completely different in their actions because a bigger part of it is the same. However, one of the main things is where they're found in the body. We already stated that vitamin K1, which comes from plant foods, is primarily stored in the liver, and it's used for making blood coagulation factors. K2, menaquinone, is mostly made by bacteria, and it's distributed throughout the body in a lot of different tissues in different places. It can also participate in blood coagulation in the liver. So if you were somehow deficient in K1, which is pretty unusual, the MK7 could make up for that as long as you had a lot of it. It turns out MK7 or the vitamin K2s are a little bit more difficult to get than the K1 in most diets because it's in a lot of vegetables and things. But just keep in mind, we've got K1, and there's just one of those. Then we've got K2, which has MK4, MK7. Think of phylloquinone, K1, MK, that's talking about menaquinone K. K2 has these different ones. And the one that really is the best absorbed and the best utilized in the body is MK7. And that's the one we sell as a supplement. You all are used to this little bottle here. And it's a very good vitamin K. It's one. When you get a dose of that, it'll show up in the bloodstream, and it'll be present for several days from that one dose. Vitamin K1 doesn't last very long, so it's absorbed well, but it's gone quickly. So MK7, and it's just in the liver, pretty much. So MK7 can be doing a lot of things that the K1 cannot. Now let's talk a little bit about blood clotting. We're not going to go into that much. It's a really complicated process, to be frank. I struggled with that one in my biochemistry classes because in nutritional biochemistry they wanted us to memorize that cascade, and it's all this over here. There's 13 blood clotting proteins that make up a big part of the cascade, and one activates the next, which activates the next, which activates the next, and trying to remember which ones come or what, that drove me crazy. But anyway, it really is a surprisingly complicated, long process. And the reason I think that we were designed that way is so that we wouldn't have one factor that gets a little bit off and suddenly all our blood coagulates and we'd be dead instantly, almost. So it makes it hard to really get completely off base with the blood coagulation because there's so many factors, so many steps that are involved that if you get just one off a little bit, it may not matter as much. Of course, if you got it completely shut down, it might shut down blood clotting. That wouldn't be good either. But it certainly would be a problem if you just had one of them and it was off, even by a little bit. But vitamin K1 and K2 can both form in the function in the synthesis of clotting. It can in the making of these clotting factors. Therefore, it is probably not important to include both K1 and K2 in our supplements. And that was one question that I had been having for a while. Would our vitamin K product be better if it was a combination of K1 and K2? And right now, I think probably there's no reason for that. Vitamin K1 deficiency is pretty rare. And if you did have it and you got lots of K2, for instance, you would still make up for it with the K2. So I don't see a reason for doing that right offhand. MK7 will pretty much do it all. Now we'll talk a little bit about vitamin K assimilation. Vitamin K is absorbed in the jejunum, which is the middle part of the small intestine. You have the duodenum, jejunum, and the ileum in the small intestine. So it's absorbed basically the same way as the other fat soluble vitamins. So you're better off getting it with a meal that contains some fat. Vitamin K2 may be synthesized to some extent in the colon by those bacteria. We don't really have a good handle on that, but a lot of people think that at least somewhat it is, but not enough to be adequate as far as supplying all your needs for vitamin K2. Vitamin K1 is well absorbed, but has a short half-life in the body. We already discussed that. And MK7 is the best absorbed of the K2s and has a longer half-life. Overall, MK7 seems to be the best form of vitamin K since, like I said, it does pretty much everything that needs to be done. And the other forms are active. The MK4, 8, and 9 do the same things that MK7 does, but they're not nearly as well absorbed as the MK7. So it's a lot harder to get that, but still they can be enough to be worthwhile in the foods. Now, vitamin K beyond coagulation, because coagulation, pretty well understood. We aren't really getting a lot of new information on that right now. There may be some down the road, but right now it's kind of at a standstill, and the research is really looking beyond K1 and coagulation and looking at K2 right now the most. Vitamin K is highly involved in calcium metabolism, and that's flux in and out of cells, activating calcium-related enzymes, and that makes it really quite important because calcium is not just for building bones. Actually, vitamin K2 gets involved in that too, but it really is used in signaling all throughout the body, and it has a lot of functions. Some of these functions are as cofactors for the carboxylation of vitamin K dependent proteins. Some of these are hepatic, liver related ones, and those would be your coagulation factors, and some are extrahepatic outside the liver. The ones outside the liver are the ones we're really interested in the most tonight. Extra hepatic vitamin K dependent proteins includes matrix GLA protein, MGP, also osteocalcin and GLA rich protein. The MGP, the matrix GLA protein, is mostly expressed in vascular smooth muscle cells and is known to inhibit calcification of vascular lesions and chondrocytes, which make up cartilage. The importance of this was illustrated in MGP knockout mice that died from aortic calcification within just a few weeks after birth. So if they did not have this vitamin K dependent protein genetically, they couldn't live long. The arteries became calcified, the aorta became calcified and just set off the circulation, and they died. So that just is a rather stark illustration of, actually, yeah, you really do need this, because these cells, like we said in the very beginning, getting the calcium goes in and comes out, in and out, and that flux, the out part of that is regulated by these vitamin K dependent proteins, like the GLA protein, the matrix GLA protein. So, it's obvious that in mammals, and probably humans, just like mice in this case, they're very dependent on vitamin K for survival, period. These people in the Netherlands hypothesized that since matrix GLA protein may prevent calcification of atherosclerotic plaque, it may also provide cardiovascular protection, and that makes sense. It's so they go hand in hand. So they evaluated the effects of vitamin K1 and 2 on coronary heart disease, all-cause mortality, and aortic calcification in 4,807 subjects. They chose subjects who didn't have any history of coronary heart disease because they didn't want to have subjects who had altered their diets because of the diagnosis of coronary heart disease. After adjustments, the relative risk of coronary heart disease was decreased in the subjects with mid and high intakes of vitamin K to 0.72 and 0.43. So, it cut the risk at the high end to less than half for the risk of coronary heart disease mortality. All-cause mortality was decreased, but not quite as much, and you would expect it not to be as much. I mean, obviously, this is not going to affect your mortality from a car wreck or something like that. So that's a different situation. Severe aortic calcification, they also measured in the subjects to see if they were getting calcification. And the severe calcification was reduced almost identically amounts as the risk of coronary heart disease mortality, to less than half in the higher group. So that was really pretty important, pretty major, and impressive. However, there was no significant effect of vitamin K1 when they looked at it. And that was kind of interesting, but probably it doesn't mean that vitamin K1 was incapable of doing that. Remember that vitamin K1 is all taken up in the liver almost completely. You have very little circulation of the vitamin K1. It's in the liver where the clotting factors are made, and that's where it goes to make those clotting factors. And so if it's not if it's all in the liver, it's not circulating out there in the heart and the blood vessels and places like that. K1 isn't, so it's not there to do the job. So right now I don't know if it's known if vitamin K1 is capable of doing it and just doesn't because it's not there, or if it's only because it's not there that it doesn't do it. But that's really kind of academic anyway. Vitamin K1 is not going to function for protecting your heart. But really think about that. That's pretty important. It decreased the cardiovascular mortality, and it increased the calcification. That kind of gives you an indication of cause and effect. So the subjects in this study were 55 years of age or older with no history of cardiovascular disease. And that decreased the possibility of other dietary changes being a part of the reason for the differences. It is also unlikely that subjects with reduced risk were simply eating better diets, since in this population, the major sources of vitamin K2 were meat and cheeses. So it wasn't what you'd think of as like they're out eating a vegetarian diet or something like that. They weren't necessarily eating better diets. They were just getting more of the vitamin K2. Interestingly, with their kind of diet, they were getting more of the MK4 and 8 and 9 than they were the MK7. Now, it turns out Asians are more likely to get MK7. And I wonder if this effect would even be stronger in Asians, because the MK7 it's much better absorbed and lasts a long time in the body. And the observation that the effects of K2 in the diet were almost identical for mortality and for calcification sort of suggests that there very likely is a cause and effect relationship, that the decreased calcification is resulting in decreased mortality. So this is pretty good evidence that the higher levels of vitamin K2 can be effective in preventing cardiovascular disease. Another study looked at vitamin K and vitamin D together for hypertension. Now, some studies have shown that vascular diseases be linked to both vitamin D and low vitamin K status. So people in this study were thinking, well, if both of these are linked to vascular disease, maybe the two of them would even do more together, and they might. They investigated whether a combination of low vitamin D and K would increase the risk of high blood pressure. In this case, they didn't look at vitamin D and K intake. They looked at the status. Vitamin D status was assessed by measuring serum concentrations above or below 50 nanomoles per liter, and that's equal to 20 nanograms per milliliter. We talked about that a while back, that there are different ways of two different systems for measuring vitamin D status. The one you probably get from your doctor is this one down here, the nanograms per milliliter. That's the one that most doctors will use. Vitamin K status was measured by dephosphorylated uncarboxylated MGP. In other words, it hadn't been acted on by vitamin K. And so if that was below 323 picomoles per liter, that's indicating a low vitamin K status. Because that's what one of the major things that we were talking about at the first, the MGP protein being carboxylated, activated by vitamin K, which in turn then can take the calcification out of the arteries and other tissues. The results, systolic blood pressure was an average of 4.8 millimeters of mercury lower in the group, higher in the vitamin D and K, and the diastolic 3.1 millimeters per mercury lower. It's not huge, but it is pretty significant, and it would be worthwhile as a part of your diet. I think these would be lower. I don't like it when they have just one cutoff and high and low, because you have a lot of people in the middle there that probably don't help that much with your results. I think if you have three of them with a middle group, then one that's quite high and one that's quite low, you would see more of a difference. And I like it when a lot of the studies do that. But in this case, they didn't. But still, they did show a significant effect for vitamin K and D together for lowering blood pressure. And they measured vitamin K status, not intake, which may be more reliable since some vitamin K1 can be converted to K2. Some vitamin K1 that you take and get from vegetables and things can be converted to K2. It doesn't look like it's enough to really make up the difference if you're low in K2, because adding more K2 and certainly has helped these studies. Several studies have also suggested vitamin K and D work synergistically and might be good to have I've thought a little bit about having a fat soluble vitamin supplement that includes both vitamin D and K, as long as well as some A and E. That's all your fat soluble vitamins, and you could take them with a meal, and that would be really a pretty nice supplement. Some people have those. This wouldn't be the first time it's been done if we do it, but I would like to have a really nice one if I do it. Other possible benefits of vitamin K, and there's a lot of them that have been studied, that they're really not as strong as what I've shown you here for the cardiovascular disease and calcification, but there's still research on them and papers published, and worth looking at in future. It can seem to help chronic kidney disease. It's an antioxidant. It's been shown to reduce the risk of diabetes, protects against liver disease, is good for immune system optimization. Actually, a pretty nice study about protecting against COVID-related cardiovascular disease. Still cardiovascular disease, but really helped with the COVID-related. And so that was interesting. It protects against neurological disease, and it appears to have some anti-obesity effects. So these are really some pretty nice benefits that really need to be studied more. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it really is. These are not nailed down yet, but the cardiovascular benefits of vitamin K2 and K7 are really quite impressive. And we know the mechanism, and we have human data to show that it's beneficial. And really, in that Rotterdam study in Netherlands, cut the cardiovascular disease rate in half in the highest level. So that was quite impressive. And the calcium gets into your arteries. One of the reasons why it probably works so well for hypertension, is as you get calcification in arteries, they become stiff and hard, and they don't expand and contract like they should to adjust the blood pressure adequately. So that's really the cardiovascular benefits of vitamin K2 and MK7 in particular are very, very well described now. And I think there's not much room for argument about it, to be honest. But that's not to say that there isn't more to learn, and there's certainly a lot more to learn about these other effects. Vitamin K appears to be very safe, and no safe upper limit has been established by the World Health Organization or the FDA. There's really not any incidence of vitamin K poisoning, so to speak. So it seems to be safe, but you don't want to get carried away with anything and get crazy with it. But vitamin K2 requirement estimates range for cardiovascular benefits seem to be in the literature ranging from 180 to 360 micrograms per day. The daily MK7 is 200 micrograms. One capsule per day would probably be good enough for most people. It wouldn't hurt you to take two, but it's safe, and that's a very nice range to be in either way. Although it is a fat soluble vitamin, it's not stored for a long time, like vitamin A, for instance. So that's one reason why it's probably a little bit safer than some of your fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A. You overdo it, you can have hard time getting rid of it. It can be toxic for a while. So vitamin K is not stored for that long. The MK7 will last several days, and that's about it in your body. And with that, I just have one kind of interesting thing. We still have a lot to learn, despite what this guy thought some years ago. In 1889, Charles Duell was commissioner of the U.S. Patent Office, and is widely quoted as saying that the patent office would soon shrink in size and eventually close because everything that can be invented has been invented. Well, that was in 1889, and I think we've proved him wrong on that. In fact, there's a whole lot of things that remain to be studied and learned and invented. We're a long ways from understanding everything. And I kind of get amused by these people who seems to be a mantra these days, trust the science, trust the science. Well, you have to keep in mind that science is, we've learned a lot, no question, and you need to pay attention to it. But to say you just blindly follow whatever this latest study isn't great either. If you look back 100 years ago, we consider those people the greatest scientists in the world. Then it's pretty primitive, and probably 100 years from now, if the world lasts that long, we'll look pretty primitive to them. So there's always some humility that needs to be go along with this, and certainly pay attention to the science. It's great to use the latest information as best we can, but don't necessarily blindly follow everything that comes out, especially if you see it's not working for you, because there's still plenty that we don't understand, and there will be for a long time. With that, I would say vitamin K looks like at the moment a very safe and a very, very beneficial supplement to take. The MK7, cardiovascular disease is the biggest killer in the United States, and it seems like it really can have a really beneficial effect in preventing that. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Anybody have anything to say about that? I think Derek has left, but vitamin K is pretty interesting. It was, like I say, my friend who is a retired neurologist asked me about it, and I decided to look it up and make sure I had a good answer for him. So I said, well, there's a lot more in the last 2 or 3 years than I realized coming out on vitamin K. I'm really glad he asked me that. How are you doing, Shaman?
I feel better. I feel better. Uh,
Oh,
so like any disease related to vitamin K deficiency?
vitamin K what?
Deficiency.
Deficiency? Well, if you really have vitamin K deficiency, right now, the K1 is the one that's, this is getting into semantics and stuff a lot, really, but is the one that's you have an RDI for and everything. And you have a blood clotting disorder if you get really low in it. Uh, but it appears with very good evidence here that if you are low in the vitamin K2 and the menaquinones, it's, you're really at a much greater risk for cardiovascular disease uh, due to calcification uh, in the arteries and soft tissues in the so in all of the vascular system, because the matrix GLA protein is actually involved in bringing calcium out of those tissues, and they are vitamin K dependent for carboxylation reaction that activates uh, that protein. So yeah, it really, the Rotterdam study we were talking about, they showed that people in the highest tertile of vitamin K intake had their risk of cardiovascular disease, relative risk was 0.43, which is pretty impressive. So it really reduced it quite a bit. And the risk of having severe aortic calcification was 0.42, I think, or it may have been reversed, 0.42, 0.43. It's about the same anyway. But yeah, it made a big difference. And that's compared to the lowest tertile. So the risk of calcification in the arteries and things is really reduced quite a lot by vitamin K intake. And it appears that it really is due to the vitamin K intake because you had both the cardiovascular disease rate and the calcification affected by the vitamin K. So yes, I think that's you could say there is a deficiency disease associated with low vitamin K. I mean, I would say that's good enough for me anyway. And hypertension was also, and you would expect calcification of arteries, making the stiff arteries to cause hypertension, and it did. They only divided into two groups, but the upper level had significantly lower blood pressure. So these cardiovascular diseases for sure are related to, well, I say for sure, almost for sure. In science, you never have anything proven 100%, I don't think, but but it's pretty good evidence. When I edit the journal, some people say that they proved this and proved that, and I'll never let them do it. I'll always provided evidence, strong evidence for or something like that. We don't do what you would consider like a mathematical proof, in science. We just have stronger and lesser evidence for things. But I think there's pretty good evidence, and these are published in major journals. The hypertension one was in the journal Hypertension by the American Heart Association, for instance. So they're in good journals, and they're nice studies showing that. So yeah, I'm taking MK7 now after I started this study. I'm in a family that I don't know anybody on either side of my family, mother or father, who's died of cancer. Everybody's died from cardiovascular disease that I know of in the family. So I say, well, maybe I need to pay more attention to that. I probably have a genetic propensity to cardiovascular disease, not so much for cancer. But yeah, I think for sure, I would say there's good evidence for a low vitamin K status in cardiovascular disease. Absolutely.
So what is the recommended dosage?
Oh, well, like we said there, what people are recommending, there's not an official recommended dosage for K2. It's not considered it's not yet considered a essential vitamin. It's just still the essential vitamin is K1 for blood clotting. So you know that the people that set RDAs and stuff haven't caught up to this science yet, and it is fairly recent. But most people are saying, you know, what did I say, 180 to 360 micrograms per day. One capsule of ours is 200, which, you know, falls well within that. 2 capsules a day would be slightly over but you know, there again, the safety profile of it's, you know, for right now looks really good. There's not been any reports of toxicity from it. And some people, you can get quite a bit in diet if you eat foods like natto, the Korean shankukjang, these fermented soybeans like that have a lot of vitamin K. I imagine there's a Korean food similar to those. I don't know.
Tempeh?
I mean, Chinese food. What's that?
Tempeh?
I haven't seen the amount in tempeh, but I would guess that it has pretty good amount of vitamin K in it. But I haven't seen that. But the natto is the highest of the MK7 form. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, this time next week, I'll be just about ready to go to Korea. Not long now.
Have you finalized your date?
Yeah, I leave next Thursday of next week. And I'll be back about the 29th, I think. So I'll be slightly over 2 weeks there, a little bit over. 2 weeks and 3 weekends, essentially. But yeah, and I need to send you an email on, you know, some of the things that we're sort of planning on the Shogal. We're going to really start pushing it at Soho this year. We're going to have a big push on that, try to have a banner up for it and out there in the displays outside the door where they have new products, have it out there and try to push it there at Soho. So we'll see how that works. It's a new thing. We have to really make a strong case, the strongest we can without, you know, stretching the truth too much for why people should be taking it. And that's, you know, that's always a challenge for almost all these things. But yeah, you know, what we're talking about tonight, the vitamin K, I was pretty impressed with how solid the research is on it. Not many supplements have as good of research as this does, and is in as good of journals. So that was pretty heartening. Well, anything else? Your family all in Europe now, Shingman?
Yeah. Oh, except me,
Okay.
so I'm recovering.
You're not. Did you ever test positive for COVID?
Oh, I tested twice, both time negative, so I didn't try the third time. So
Yeah. Well, probably you just had something else. I
maybe
mean,
flu, you know.
yeah, you never know. The air in those airplanes are dry and hard on you.
Yeah.
They're better now than they used to be, but the newer planes are, but still they're not that great. Okay, well, I guess we'll call it quits then and go. I hope everybody learned something about vitamin K today. I think the MK7 is a wonderful product. I had questions about, in my own mind, whether or not MK7 itself was good enough because there's all these other forms and if they should be combined. I think MK7 by itself pretty well covers the bases, to be honest. So that answered that question too. And the research is more solid than the last time I looked at MK7, 7 or 8 years ago. I guess I looked at it when we first started it. And you know, the research is coming along, and I hope that it won't be too long till people really come to a broader realization of how much this can benefit people, and also start studying some of these other things that I mentioned up here in this slide, because there's limited research for a lot of things, the kidney disease, the risk of diabetes, protection against COVID-related. About 40% of the people who die from COVID is because of COVID-related cardiovascular disease. It seems like the vitamin K protects quite a bit against the COVID-related cardiovascular disease. So, these things are needing more study, though. Hopefully, that will be coming down the road, and it'll be interesting to watch. And you all have a nice evening, and I'll be talking to you all soon. So, glad you were able to come, and good night.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jim.
bye.